Okay, let's go on to the second of this week's topics, and that is moving from theory to practice. And to do that, we look at political ideologies. Now, political ideologies are related to political theory in the sense that they're normative, meaning that we want some kind of ideal to be promoted, but it's much more practical and grounded in what's actually going on. All political ideologies have four components to them. First, they provide some kind of interpretation of where we are now. The term ideology comes from the 19th century and it started in France, and it literally means the science of ideas. Later on, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who came up with sort of the theory of Marxism or the ideology of Marxism that we'll look at in more detail, basically came up with an alternate definition. They argued, so those are the two general definitions. Now, in terms of how you understand ideologies, ideologies need to be understood in terms of how they relate to a group or an individual with an ideology's views on the role of government. And it usually means the role of government on two things: the economic arrangement of government, whether it should be completely free or liberal, meaning liberty, or whether it should be done collectively, meaning the state should be deeply involved in controlling the economic system. And again, this is a scale, so people in the middle tend to be more moderate. They think freedom is good, but they also see the need for collective action. The second scale that you have to consider is sort of a social arrangement. And again, you have liberal and collective. People on the far end of the liberal scale believe that government needs to stay out of our lives so long as we don't hurt anyone else. People on the collective side tend to believe that government actually has a very important role in promoting certain values and order and social mores. And so these are the two main views on the role of government: collective versus liberal on the economy versus social or personal life. And so what we do when we try to understand and classify ideologies, we basically do what Aristotle did. We come up with typologies, and we cross the two scales, and we come up with four general categories of ideologies. If you look at the horizontal scale first, that's the scale of economic life. Should government be involved in economic life? On the left, yeah, absolutely, regulate or even control the economy. On the right, no, stay out of the economy. And in the middle, a little mix of both. And then if you look at the up and down scale, the vertical scale, personal and social life, liberal is, hey, government should leave us alone, again, so long as we don't hurt others. And collective, government should promote and maintain social order. So you have four types of ideologies that emerge from these two scales being crossed. The first is the purest for freedom, libertarianism. And it basically says, hey, look, stay out of our economic life, no government regulation, lowest taxes possible, and government basically has no role in regulating business or the free and open exchange of labor for money. In other words, laissez-faire capitalism. That's called libertarianism because it also says stay out of our personal lives. If we want to smoke pot, for example, fine. If a woman wants to have an abortion, that's her decision, fine. That's what a libertarian generally believes, that liberty is the most important value and it supersedes any other role of the state. The second, which is the polar opposite of libertarianism, is statism. Now, statism is a very broad term because it includes statism on the left as well as statism on the right. And it basically says, look, use the power of the state or government for all necessary things. If there's a lot of inequality and you believe inequality is wrong, like the Greeks did, then you can use the power of the state to redistribute income or to regulate how much money people can make or how much money they have to share with others. Uh, on the other hand, you also use the state to control social behavior. If there are certain things that are right and wrong or order needs to be preserved, government's role is to make sure that that occurs. And so statism can be either a left-wing or a right-wing sort of ideology toward government. It just means lots of government. Modern liberalism, which I'll distinguish next week, basically says, look, you can regulate the economy but leave people alone. In the United States, that tends to be the Democratic Party. Basically, it says government regulation in the economy is important because without it, people are going to be at a disadvantage, particularly when they come up against large corporations or other private organizations with a lot of resources. But we should leave people alone. Modern conservatism, Republican Party tends to fall in that in the United States, said, look, we need free markets. Stay out of business. Don't regulate them. Don't put on these cumbersome sort of tax codes. We want government to stay out of the economy, but government's job is to protect people, to preserve the social order. And so you can use the state to form and force collective social behavior. So again, you can ban homosexuality, you can ban abortion, you can sort of ban inappropriate behavior, and believe it or not, you could sort of prevent people from having guns. What I've done is I've kind of plotted out generally, this is sort of a rough estimation of several different nations in the world right now and where they would fall on this on these scales. And you see in the upper right hand corner a more classically liberal governing system. And the only one up there is the USA. New Zealand would probably be there, and maybe Australia, although Australia is kind of further over on to the left on the economic scale. Tends to be freer markets and freer people. To their left is modern liberal state, and most of Europe would fall into this category, but so do places like Brazil and Ecuador, where there's social democracy and redistribution of wealth and income. If you go down now to the economic collective and social collective statism, you have countries like China, Saudi Arabia, and there are a number of other countries where there's very strict social regulation as well as pretty strong governmental control of the economy. China probably belongs a little further on the horizontal scale to the left, but it's hard because they've had a lot of economic reform. And then if you look at the last category in the bottom right hand, you have essentially oligarchies where the economy tends to be freer for some people but not for others, and social behavior is regulated quite strongly. Russia is a good example of that, and Singapore is actually a fairly liberal economy, meaning free economy, but a fairly socially controlled nation as well. So again, this rough estimations of some, feel free to disagree with me in the discussion section. If you see your country or a country you know well that you don't think belongs there, you can even speculate where other countries might go. That sort of the candidates, the most ideologically extreme candidates are Bernie Sanders for the Democrats and probably Ben Carson or Ted Cruz for the Republicans. These are the most ideologically pure. So that's a really important thing to understand, that these are spatial. So you may fall into a particular category, but where you fall within that category matters as well. There are a couple other things I want you to consider. First, as you read through the ideologies next week, I want you to think about the assumptions that these ideologies make about human nature. Meaning, are we generally to be trusted? Are we generally not to be trusted? Can we do things on our own nicely? Or do we have to be controlled? Also think about the role of the state, but also look at the role of history, of culture, and of experience as you go through this, and try to figure out why the United States is a little more of a classically liberal country than, say, even Great Britain or Canada or Germany. History, culture, experience matters a great deal, and so you have to look at things other than these two scales to try to figure out, well, why does one country or one person fit further over than the other? So again, think about it. I hope this has been helpful. I know you're reading about models of democracy and discussing it. They're related to ideologies, but they're a little different. I did that on purpose. Next week, we're going to get into some specific ideologies and get into more depth, and you'll have readings on that. Okay? All right.